When Judge Catherine Forrest sentenced Ross Ulbricht, otherwise known as Dread Pirate Roberts, after the fictional character in The Princess Bride, to serve a double life term, she justified the punishment, claiming that it prevent other budding dark web entrepreneurs. Ironically, it only advertised the dark web even more, and to people who'd been unaware of its existence for so long. Now, the world knew how Ulbricht was able to make his millions, selling narcotics and contraband on the dark web. While many ventured into the business of selling drugs online, not everyone saw the same level of success as Ulbricht. For a while, drug enforcement agencies were thoroughly convinced that they'd taken over the dark web drug trade. They were wrong. Ulbricht's Silk Road might have fallen off after seeing its heyday, but this only paved the way for another dark web drug dealer to step into the spotlight. AlphaBay, who would later on refer to himself solely as admin, swept in where Dread Pirate Roberts left off. However, AlphaBay's enterprise rose to a level that investigators had never seen before. For context, the Silk Road had 12,000 products listed during its peak, compared to 200,000 by AlphaBay. AlphaBay announced that he'd be overseeing the operations, but that his staff would now handle all communications. Sales had passed the $1 million benchmark. AlphaBay was, no questions asked, the king drug pin of the dark web. The World Wide Web refers to a free-for-all information sharing service provided via the internet. The dark web, while still a part of the World Wide Web, requires specific software and authorization to access it. Private computer channels can interact, buy and sell, and conduct business via the dark web without ever divulging sensitive, or in this case, incriminating information. Not to be confused with the deep web, which is still a part of the World Wide Web, albeit more difficult to access. Users on the dark web protect their identities through layered encryption. The fact of the matter is that people communicating via dark web channels rely on anonymity. Why? Well, because the information contained therein ranges from unconventional and untraditional to deranged and criminal. A 2014 study found that the number one purchase on the dark web was child pornography. The number two would be drugs. As the host of the dark web's largest and most thriving drug administration network, AlphaBay had but three simple rules: no child abuse imagery, no murder-for-hire plots, and nothing that would otherwise alert the attention of law enforcement agencies in Russia or members of the former Soviet Union. Investigators were first alerted to AlphaBay's criminal activities back in 2013. This was when the Silk Road was thriving as the leading drug network, and AlphaBay was focused more on carding activities. AlphaBay was, after all, regarded as the darknet's most notorious carder. The term here refers to someone who has all the skills and expertise necessary to hack into credit card databases, access account login information, and commit fraud using social security numbers. That was AlphaBay's number one export up until 2015, with drugs being a fixture for the longest time, but never the best seller. After Ulbricht's 2015 sentencing, Vice's motherboard reached out to Alpha2 for an interview where the drug kingpin commented, "Everyone has to eat," when answering whether Ulbricht's double life term had deterred him from expanding his drug empire. AlphaBay believed he was untouchable, and for a long time, so did investigators. They explored every possible avenue, every lead, and every new discovery attempting to breach the online drug lord's identity. Their only leads until 2016 were a possible theory that linked AlphaBay to Russia and an interview he'd given to Deep.com where AlphaBay claimed that he was safe from the DEA because he'd relocated to an offshore country. Things changed in 2016 when Robert Miller, the lead investigator in a budding case against AlphaBay, received a strange email. Miller had been working with Grant Rabin from the Attorney General's office. Rabin was the one who breached the idea of gathering a team of officers and investigators to work against the booming darknet drug trade. Once a defense attorney for white-collar criminals, Rabin had since transferred to the Attorney General's office in Fresno, California, where he mostly worked on money laundering ploys and schemes. As part of his newfound venture, Rabin started studying bank transfer information released by all major banks as part of the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970. He made a startling discovery. It's important to remember that this was back during the early 2010s, when cryptocurrency was still in its very infancy. The concept had been introduced, but it wasn't mainstream just yet. The only people with a semblance of an idea about online currency were people who were afraid afraid of a paper trail. That is people conducting business via the dark net. Ray-Bin discovered that a trail of cryptocurrency exchanges for real money was being made by several people with some links to either money laundering or drug trafficking. Ray-Bin, Miller, and a few other volunteers from Fresco's investigative units decided to track down the source. The operation began sometime in 2014, shortly after Ulbricht's arrest. For a while, Miller was tasked with decrypting the criminals' exchanges and finding routes to their physical addresses. Together, Miller and Ray-Bin arrested several small-time drug dealers who would, interestingly so, transfer their packages of drugs ranging from marijuana to cocaine and ecstasy via the United States Postal Service, wrapped in layers and layers of plastic. The team had always known about AlphaBay. Almost all of the dealers they busted during this time had interacted with the dark web host. Ray-Bin, however, didn't want to jump the gun on launching an all-out offensive against Alpha-02. It wasn't a gamble he was willing to take until they had concrete evidence of who Alpha-02 really was. Now to the anonymous email that Miller received in 2016. The sender requested anonymity, but revealed that he was a Canadian citizen who'd visited with an acquaintance named Alexander Kazes while traveling to Thailand. The sender, who we'll refer to as Phil for now, claimed that Alexander lived in a modest-sized home in Bangkok and lived an otherwise ordinary life. Phil had been connected with Alexander via a friend after he revealed that he wanted an investor for a new e-commerce business. Alexander Kazes had moved to Bangkok after amassing a small fortune by being one of the earliest investors in digital currency. Phil told Miller that the only thing that truly stuck out about Alexander during his first visit was that he had almost too much money, to the point where his only woe was not knowing how to spend it. Thinking this was a non-issue, Phil spoke business with Alexander, who seemed interested in starting up an e-commerce site. The young man claimed that he dabbled into the world of e-marketing himself, but realized it wasn't for him. As the two got close, Phil realized that there was something eerie about his new friend. Alexander Kazes would then travel to Canada over the following Christmas and invested $150,000 in Phil's venture, no questions asked. Phil would then travel back to Bangkok, where Alexander came to pick him up in a Lamborghini. According to his new friend, he was only spending money because he felt like he'd collected just about enough of it to spend on things that seemed luxurious. An interesting thing to note here is that Alexander didn't do any drugs himself and rarely ever drank beer. He was 25 years old around the time that he became friends with Phil and was often dismissed for his relatively short stature and his baby face. Besides his somewhat misogynistic views, people didn't seem to have much of a problem with Alex. Phil, however, believed that the man who claimed to have built an empire via cryptocurrency was hiding something sinister under that guise. In his email to Miller, he claimed that while he had no concrete proof of Alex's involvement in anything illegal, he had a hunch that the money was coming in from elsewhere. His best bet was drug dealing. While Alexander's fast wealth was indeed concerning, Ray-Bin needed more information tying him to a criminal enterprise than just a hunch. This was when Miller started following up with the only other lead they had on Alpha-02's real identity, an email address. What's ironic is that for a criminal mastermind who'd overseen the sales of some 200,000 drugs throughout his career as a dark web drug lord, he had used his actual email address for a welcome email for new customers during AlphaBay's initial days. This email, pimp_alex_91@hotmail.com, was also linked to a dating profile set up by Alexander Kazes when he was 17, which confirmed that the 91 corresponded to his birth year. Furthermore, Alexander had used the same email as his primary email for his LinkedIn profile, where he claimed to have founded the Quebec-based tech firm Ibex Technology. But you know what was the most telling detail? During a deep dive into internet archives, Miller realized that Alexander had used a familiar username on a forum, Dream in Code. The username? Alpha-02. With Alexander as their primary suspect, the team contacted the DEA's office, the FBI, and their correspondents in Thailand. When a Dutch team learned about the United States' plan to intercept the biggest drug kingpin of the darknet, they shared the independent research that also found them lurking in Thailand for Alpha-02. Jan Sanchez, an investigator for the DEA, intercepted another alter ego of Alexander on the troubling misogynistic forum Roosh V under the name Raw Mio. Here, Alexander would divulge dirty details about his exploits with women and brag about how his wife, who was then pregnant with his child, was unsuspecting of it all. Why was Raw Mio significant in the chase after Alpha-02? While his two alter egos never really meshed with one another, Raw Mio was Alexander's escape. He treated Roosh V be as his online diary of sorts, where he divulged details about his life, purchases, and all the lessons he'd learned from his 25 years of living. A key detail unveiled itself during Sanchez's hours upon hours of digging through Ramio's posts, that he only used his home computer for conducting business. Investigators needed a warrant to search Alexander's primary residence and to seize his computer. On July 5th, with more than enough evidence tying Alexander with the online alias AlphaBay, Thai police intercepted the supposed kingpin at his home along with his computer. It didn't take long, seconds really, for them to log into his computer and see that Alexander was logged into AlphaBay as the site administrator. There wasn't any further need to investigate into the life of the drug kingpin on the dark net. They'd found him. Alexander's assets seized by the U.S. government included 6.6 million Canadian dollars in Bitcoin, 2.4 million in Ethereum, 622,000 in Monero, and $980,512 in Zcash. He had at least 11 bank accounts and cryptocurrency exchange accounts registered in his name or his wife's name in Thailand, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Again, Ulbricht was convicted of 2 life terms for his illegal drug trade. Alexander's business was worth quadruple of that of the Silk Road. If convicted, he could be facing heftier fines, stronger punishment, and more notoriety than any drug lord in history. Only that Alexander Kazes was never actually convicted, not for lack of trying, but because on July 5th, when investigators raided his mansion in Bangkok and escorted him to a holding cell ready to transport him to prison or for possible extradition the next day, they found him hanging from his cell bathroom by a towel. AlphaBay had committed suicide before he could be put on trial. This was by no means the end of darknet drug trading. However, AlphaBay's arrest and AlphaBay going dark meant that the largest online drug trafficking network had fallen. Did you know that there was a mysterious man building and running an empire in the shadows of the internet? Did you even know that there was such a thing as a dark web? What are your thoughts about the dark web and situations like Alexander's? Is this the type of story that we continue to hear about in the future? Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section. And if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.